It was past midnight, the kind of night where the city sleeps, but her heart could not. What happened next would shatter everything you think you know about fate, destiny, and the power of human connection. This isn't just a story about a wrong number. This is about the moment when desperation meets divine intervention. A tiny apartment, a baby crying in the bedroom, and a mother, desperate, exhausted, and out of options. But what she didn't know was that 3 blocks away, a man who had everything was about to discover he had nothing at all. If you love stories that will make you question everything you believe about coincidence and destiny, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications because what you're about to hear will change how you see the world forever. Her name was Leah, 24 years old. Single mother. Working 3 part-time jobs just to keep the lights on. Tonight was different. Tonight, she had reached the end of her rope. Let me paint you the picture of Leah's world. A 400-square-foot apartment in the roughest part of town. Walls so thin she could hear her neighbors' every conversation. A refrigerator that hummed too loudly and barely kept food cold. And in the corner, a crib she'd bought secondhand for $30. Charlie. Her 18-month-old son, the light of her life, and the weight on her shoulders. He had been crying for 2 hours straight. Not the normal cry of a tired baby, but the desperate wail of hunger. Leah stood there, holding an empty formula container. She shook it again, hoping somehow a miracle would appear at the bottom. Nothing. The last of Charlie's formula was gone, and payday wasn't until Friday. 3 days away. 3 days might as well have been 3 years. She opened her wallet. $12. $12 to feed herself and her baby for 3 days. She did the math in her head. Formula cost $40. Diapers, another $20. She was $28 short of keeping her baby fed. This wasn't the first time. Leah had been here before, staring at empty shelves, counting pennies, making impossible choices. Last month, she had eaten crackers for dinner, 3 nights in a row, so Charlie could have his bottle. The month before, she had walked 6 miles to work to save bus fare for baby food. But tonight felt different. Tonight, pride wasn't enough to fill her baby's stomach. 3 blocks away, in a penthouse that cost more than most people make in a lifetime, Jackson Albright sat alone. The irony wasn't lost on him, surrounded by luxury, yet completely isolated from humanity. Jackson Albright, 32 years old. Net worth, $2.3 billion. He had built his tech empire from nothing, creating apps that connected millions of people worldwide. Yet he hadn't had a meaningful conversation with another human being in months. His penthouse stretched across the entire top floor of the city's most expensive building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire metropolitan area. He could see thousands of lights below, each one representing a life, a family, a story he would never know. Jackson's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Board meeting reminders. Stock alerts. Investment opportunities. But never anything human. Never anything real. He had everything money could buy, and somehow it had bought him nothing that mattered. His last relationship had ended 2 years ago, when she admitted she loved his bank account more than him. His family called only when they needed money. His friends, well, he wasn't sure he had any real friends left. That night, Jackson was doing what he did every night. Staring out at the city, wondering if this was all there was. Success without purpose, wealth without meaning, connection without connection. He was about to put his phone down and go to bed when it buzzed. One more notification in a sea of meaningless digital noise. But this message was different. Leah's hands trembled as she picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts, looking for someone, anyone who might be able to help. Her sister was struggling too. Her parents had already helped too many times. Her few friends were all in similar situations. Then she saw it. James, a coworker who had lent her money before. She hesitated. She had already borrowed from him twice this month, but Charlie's cries were getting weaker, and that terrified her more than embarrassment. She typed slowly, James, I'm so sorry to bother you again. I need $40 for Charlie's formula. I'll pay you back Friday, I promise. Please. Her thumb hovered over the send button. Every part of her hated this moment. She had always been independent, strong, self-reliant. But motherhood had taught her that sometimes love means swallowing your pride. She closed her eyes and pressed send. The message sent. But in her exhaustion, her desperation, her emotional state, she had made a mistake. A mistake that would change 2 lives forever. Meanwhile, Jackson's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expecting another board meeting reminder or stock alert. Instead, he saw a message from a number he didn't recognize. He read it once, then twice, then a third time. This wasn't spam. This wasn't a business proposition. This was raw, human, real. For the first time in months, Jackson felt something stir inside his chest. Not the calculated interest of a business deal, but something deeper. Something he had almost forgotten existed. Compassion. Leah stared at her phone, waiting for James's reply. Instead, she got something she never expected. I think you meant to send this to someone else. Her heart sank. She had texted a stranger. A complete stranger now knew her most vulnerable moment, her deepest desperation. Her first instinct was to block the number and pretend it never happened. But then, another message appeared. Is your baby going to be okay? 7 simple words. But in those 7 words, Leah heard something she hadn't heard in a long time. Genuine concern. Not judgment, not pity, just care. She stared at the screen for 5 minutes, trying to decide how to respond. Who was this person? Why did they care? Should she even answer? Finally, she typed, "We'll manage. Sorry again." It was her default response. The answer she gave everyone when they asked if she needed help. We'll manage. It was true and untrue at the same time. They would manage. Somehow they always did. But managing wasn't living. Managing wasn't thriving. Managing was just surviving. Jackson read her response and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The desire to help without expecting anything in return. Not for tax write-offs, not for publicity, not for business connections. Just because. He typed, I can help, no strings. 2 words that would echo in Leah's mind for days. No strings. When was the last time someone had offered help without conditions, without expectations, without wanting something in return? She laughed softly through her tears, typing back, Thanks, but I don't take money from strangers. And then she put her phone down. She rocked Charlie back to sleep, humming a lullaby her mother used to sing to her. The baby finally quieted, exhausted from crying. Leah held him close, breathing in his sweet baby smell, trying not to think about tomorrow's hunger. But Jackson couldn't stop thinking about her message. About a mother so desperate she accidentally reached out to a stranger, yet so proud she wouldn't accept help from one. He found himself wondering about her story. Was she alone? Where was the baby's father? How long had she been struggling? For the first time in years, Jackson was thinking about someone other than himself. An hour passed, then 2. Leah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Charlie's face when the formula ran out. She saw the empty refrigerator. She saw the bills piling up on her kitchen table. She picked up her phone again. The stranger's message was still there. I can help. No strings. What if he was serious? What if this was one of those moments her grandmother used to talk about, when angels appear in your darkest hour? But what if he wasn't? What if this was some kind of scam? Or worse? Leah's mind raced through possibilities. Best case scenario. A good person wanted to help. Worst case scenario. She was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She looked at Charlie, sleeping peacefully for the first time in hours. She made her decision. She typed her Venmo information and sent it before she could change her mind. Then she waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Nothing. She felt stupid. Of course it was too good to be true. Random strangers don't just send money to people they don't know. She had been naive, desperate, foolish. She was about to put her phone away when it buzzed. Payment received. 10. $0 from Jackson Albright. Leah stared at the screen. She blinked. She rubbed her eyes. She looked again. $10,000. Not $40 for formula. Not $100 to help with groceries. $10,000. More money than she had seen in one place in her entire life. Her hands shook so violently she almost dropped her phone. She couldn't breathe. This had to be a mistake. People didn't just send $10,000 to strangers. This couldn't be real. But it was real. The money was in her account. Real. Spendable. Life-changing money. For the first time in months, Leah cried tears of joy instead of desperation. Jackson stared at his phone screen after sending the payment. He had just sent $10,000 to a complete stranger, based on nothing but an accidental text message. His financial advisors would have called him crazy. His board of directors would have questioned his judgment. But for the first time in years, Jackson felt alive. He had sent the money on impulse, but now he found himself genuinely curious about this woman. What was her story? How had she ended up in this situation? Was she really as proud and resilient as her messages suggested? Meanwhile, Leah spent the next 3 days in a daze. She bought formula, lots of it. She bought groceries, real groceries, not just the cheapest options. She paid her electric bill, her phone bill, her rent. For the first time in months, she wasn't counting pennies. But more than the money, she was consumed by questions. Who was Jackson Albright? Why had he helped her? What did he want in return? Because everyone wanted something in return. That had been Leah's experience with people. Her baby's father had wanted her to get rid of Charlie. Her last boyfriend had wanted her to choose between him and her son. Even her family's help came with lectures about her choices. But Jackson's messages remained simple, brief, and consistent. Are you and the baby okay? Do you need anything else? How is Charlie doing? No demands. No expectations. No strings. It was unsettling. Leah had built walls around her heart to protect herself and Charlie from disappointment. She had learned not to depend on anyone, not to trust promises, not to believe in fairy tales. But here was a man who seemed to challenge everything she believed about human nature. Just as Leah was beginning to believe in miracles, life decided to test her faith. It was a Tuesday morning. Charlie woke up with a fever. Not just the sniffles or a little fussiness, a real fever. 102 degrees. He was listless, wouldn't eat, barely responded when she called his name. Leah's mother instincts kicked into overdrive. She had no car, no insurance, and the nearest hospital was 30 minutes away by bus. But Charlie needed help, and he needed it now. She called a taxi, $40 she couldn't afford. At the hospital, they ran tests. Blood work, X-rays. The bill was mounting by the hour. The doctor said Charlie had a serious respiratory infection that required immediate treatment and monitoring. How much? Leah asked the billing department. With your payment plan options, you're looking at about $800 up front, and the medication will be another $200. $1,000. Even with Jackson's gift, a $1,000 medical emergency would devastate their newfound stability. Leah sat in the hospital waiting room, holding her sick baby, feeling the familiar weight of impossible choices. She could ask Jackson for help again, but what would he think? That she was taking advantage of his kindness? That she was just another person looking for a handout? She stared at her phone for an hour, typing and deleting messages to Jackson. Finally, she decided she couldn't ask. She would figure this out on her own, somehow. She always did. But Jackson had been thinking about Leah and Charlie every day since their first exchange. Something about their story had touched a part of his heart he thought had died years ago. When 24 hours passed without hearing from her, the longest gap since their first contact, he sensed something was wrong. He sent a simple message. Everything okay? That's when Leah broke down. Sitting in that sterile hospital room, holding her sick baby, she told a complete stranger everything. About Charlie's fever, about the medical bills, about her fear that she was failing as a mother. Jackson's response was immediate. Send me the hospital information. Within an hour, all of Charlie's medical bills were paid. The medication was delivered. A specialist was consulted. Everything Charlie needed was taken care of. But more importantly, Jackson didn't make Leah feel small for needing help. He didn't lecture her about saving money or being prepared. He just helped. As Charlie recovered, Leah and Jackson's text exchanges became longer, more personal. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, movies they loved, dreams they'd had as children. Leah learned that Jackson had grown up poor, raised by a single mother not unlike herself. His success hadn't been handed to him. He had worked 18-hour days for years to build his company. He understood struggle in a way that most billionaires never would. Jackson learned that Leah was studying for her nursing degree online, taking classes whenever Charlie napped. She dreamed of giving her son a better life, of being the kind of mother who could provide stability and opportunity. Her strength and determination reminded him why he had worked so hard in the first place. They discovered they lived only 3 blocks apart, but moved in completely different worlds. Jackson in his penthouse, isolated by wealth. Leah in her tiny apartment, struggling but surrounded by the richness of purpose. One evening, after Charlie had fallen asleep, Leah sent a message that would change everything. "I've been thinking about that night I texted you by accident. What if it wasn't an accident? What if the universe knew we both needed something we couldn't give ourselves?" Jackson stared at that message for 20 minutes before responding. He had built his fortune on logic, data, measurable outcomes. But Leah was asking him to consider something he had never believed in. Fate. "What do you think we needed?" he typed back. "You needed to remember what it feels like to matter to someone. I needed to remember that good people still exist." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to Jackson in years, and it was completely true. Months passed. Charlie grew stronger and healthier. Leah finished her nursing degree with Jackson's quiet support, not just financial, but emotional encouragement when she doubted herself. Jackson discovered that having someone to care about gave his success, meaning it had never had before. But they had never met in person. Their entire relationship existed in the digital space between 2 phones. Until one day, when Leah made a decision that would test everything they had built together. "I want to meet you," she texted. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I want to look in the eyes of the person who saved my life and say thank you." Jackson's first instinct was to say no. He had built walls around himself for good reasons. Getting too close to people meant getting hurt. It meant vulnerability he couldn't afford. But Leah had already seen him at his most vulnerable through their messages. She knew his fears, his dreams, his regrets. What did he have left to hide? They met at a small coffee shop halfway between their worlds. Jackson arrived first, nervous in a way he hadn't felt since his first board meeting. When Leah walked in, carrying Charlie on her hip, he recognized her immediately. Not because he had seen her picture, but because she carried herself exactly as she wrote, with dignity, strength, and quiet grace. "Jackson," she said, approaching his table. "Leah." They talked for 3 hours. Charlie played with sugar packets, while his mother and her mysterious benefactor discovered they were even more compatible in person than they had been through text messages. As they prepared to leave, Leah took Jackson's hand. "That night I sent you that message by accident," she said. "I was at the lowest point of my life. I thought I was texting someone I knew, asking for help I was ashamed to need. Instead, I found someone I didn't know I was looking for." Jackson squeezed her hand gently. "I've been successful for years," he said. "But I've never felt useful until I met you. You gave me something money can't buy." "What's that?" "Purpose." Today, Leah works as a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital. Jackson quietly funds a foundation that helps single mothers pursue education and career opportunities. They're married now, raising Charlie together in a home filled with love instead of desperation. But their story isn't really about money or even love. It's about the moment when 2 people in completely different circumstances discovered they needed exactly what the other had to offer. Leah needed someone to believe in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Jackson needed someone to care about when caring had become a foreign concept. Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. Sometimes our biggest mistakes become our greatest blessings. Sometimes a wrong number is actually exactly the right number. And sometimes, when we're brave enough to reach out in our darkest moments, we discover we're not alone after all. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in the power of human connection and unexpected miracles, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button Subscribe for more incredible true stories, and remember, you never know when your next message might change someone's life forever. Thank you for listening. And remember, there are no accidents, only opportunities in disguise.